Hi everybody, welcome. If it's okay, we're going to do this talk in order. We're going to do Bradley, then move over to Kathy, then Brian, and then we're going to end up outside with Ronald. I would like for those of us who are speaking to be able to remove our masks just so that everyone can hear us. Feel free to use the space and keep your distance if you need to. Thanks. Hi, my name is Jimmy Castillo. I'm the Director of Exhibitions and Curatorial Projects here at Art League Houston. Really excited to be here for this first round of exhibitions. These four artists, we had a lot of fun putting this all together, and we're happy to share it with everybody. Happy to see everybody here, so welcome. I'd like to introduce first Bradley Kerl, who is the artist here with his works. He's a painter and an arts educator based in Houston, Texas. He has degrees from his BFA from University of North Texas and his MFA from the University of Houston. He's exhibited works all over the place, nationally, internationally, solo shows in LA at Jonathan Hobson Galveston Art Palace Gallery here in Houston, as well as international exhibitions in London, Amsterdam, China, Australia. He's also done residencies in Tuscany, Italy, and recently I think the residency at 100 West Corsicana in Corsicana, Texas, which is really exciting. So I'll hand him the floor, and Bradley, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work?
Sure. Hi everybody, welcome. Good to see you all here. Wanted to say thank you first to Jimmy, Art League, Aaron, Jenny, Nicole, everyone here, the whole team for helping coordinate everything and set up. It's been really nice working with you all these past few days, few months rather. So yeah, I think it's important for me to talk about the sort of journey the show went on to where we are today. The show was initially scheduled for May 2020. We all know it happened right around that time.
What happened?
I forget. Anyway, so not complaining, but obviously the show was postponed, pushed back, and so I was really, proud of myself. I was like ahead of schedule, ahead of the game, had everything done. The show is laid out, and then of course, it fell through. So this, what you're seeing today, is like maybe the third or fourth iteration of this show, just based on the way it was pushed back. And so when the time came to actually put together, like for real, it was, just thinking about what to do, and I had a lot of different ideas, just kind of being straightforward with it, the work that was going on currently in the studio. But as I was thinking about it, over the course of a number of months, it made sense to start thinking about it in terms of kind of a survey of the past 2.5, 3 years, like what we've all been through, what I've been through personally, and think about putting it together that way. And so that became really helpful in some ways to kind of connect dots, I guess, between all the work going on in the studio currently in the past 3 years, and also just sort of like process, like the trauma of the past 3 years. And so, and that puts us here. A lot of windows, a lot of doorways. So the title, in and out, I can talk about that as well. That again became a nice way to kind of frame and conceptualize, put everything together, looking at the work and like how does this work make sense together? And it just became about this play of looking in, looking out. Physically, the paintings, they're doing the thing that paintings can do as like a portal, or it can be kind of flat and push you out, and thinking about inner life, outer life, what we've all been through, the past 3 years again, and just kind of like in and out of our lives, the kind of rhythm we've been going through, in and out of lockdown, in and out of masks, all these kind of things. So I thought the title worked well for all those reasons. What else?
Can you talk a little bit about the survey aspect of the paintings, and is there kind of a way that you're thinking about all this grouping as it relates to the time that you're surveying?
Right. Well, I mean, there's certain paintings that were made initially for the show, thinking about these 3 black paintings here, and also other big painting. And I guess at a certain point I was really didn't want to show these paintings, kind of like sort of scared of them, and they kind of made me feel in a funny way, the way I wasn't sort of expecting. They were made pre-pandemic, and then during pandemic, sort of pulled them out in the studio, put them up, and they just had a different kind of feel to them. Really kind of harsh and, just foreboding. Maybe they were like just sort of that idea of kind of looking out and seeing this sort of teasing that sort of outside world, or sort of a world beyond this sort of cloistered space. And all these things were going on, these window paintings, sort of building up, coalescing, and I think just also in general, like the way it's, big paintings, some smaller paintings and etchings, that's kind of the way the studio is generally. Mm-hmm. There'll be multiple things going on at once, and I like having having things to bounce off of, having foils to work from. The etchings, there's paintings inspired by the etchings, and all the work kind of plays with each other. If you spend time, you can kind of see, some are really straightforward, like the blue window paint here is a blue etching version of that, print version. And so it's just, I think it shows what's going on in my mind in general, and the way I bounce around the studio. I think it's a nice collection of things. Again, it's just show this kind of process in studio in general.
Great. Yeah. Actually, now that you mentioned, can you talk a little bit about this really great sort of dramatic variation in scale? You have these works that are really large, and then you made these etchings very recently, right? Can you talk a little bit about working sort of that way, that scale, after doing all this?
Yeah, I think, again, like thinking about being in the studio and bouncing around and reacting to certain paintings. Like if I make a big giant painting, kind of doesn't necessarily make sense for me to do another one right after that, just because it's taxing, it's difficult, it's big, it's unruly, it's just sort of also kind of indulgent to make a painting that big. And so it's just sort of self-consciously maybe, I need to make something smaller to go with it. But in terms of putting together a show, thinking about that, think about rhythm, like looking in the room, it's nice to have, something small into something big, or just it not be all the same scale. But also it's a challenge, like having something that small be able to draw you in or have as much interest as like a bigger painting does. I like that, the challenge of that. And it's just, another way I can sort of bounce off from my work to work.
Yeah, we had a really good conversation about the process. Can you talk about the way that you made these etchings, the way that you did the color and everything?
Yeah, so the etchings I made with a friend of mine, Kyle, who actually does the residency in Corsicana. We've started, since my residency there, we started this conversation back and forth through printmaking, through etching, which is really great to have someone kind of be pushing me, making me think about work in different ways. And so I think that, thinking back, I remember thinking about the Art League show, wanting to have, I was doing these really big things and wanting to have some small things, and it made sense to keep working with this etching project, because it's something we kind of leave ongoing. I'll work on some plates at the studio in Corsicana, kind of leave them there for a rainy day, for a show, or any opportunity. And so I had started them a few years back, and with the intent of hopefully it would work out that I could finish up this series for our show here. And so I went back just very recently. That's kind of the last thing that came together for the show. Was there, I guess, in mid to late January, and kind of went through and knocked him out. But he's amazing. It's a really fascinating process if you don't know about etching. But all the thinking about the ones with the kind of gradient, those all have 5 or 6 individual plates. So it's really. I also like they're really kind of deceptive. They are tiny little creations that have so much work behind them. And my bit, honestly, is the easiest, where I just kind of have an image or have an idea and kind of do the drawing phase, and then Kyle starts working and putting things together. Like, what about this? What about that? And it's just a great collaboration we have going. So, but it's also like they become like, you know, this painting right next to it is from the last series of etchings we did a number of years ago now, maybe 5, and that kind of comes from the idea of those are all black and white, just line based, and it's sort of it's a stark contrast having something like that next to one of my, you know, regular paintings that are just kind of lots of color over the top, bright, and so it sort of begs to be filled in almost like a coloring book, and so that's where that came from. You can see that kind of one-to-one connection there. And so it started like I had a drawing and sort of filled it in really loosely like a coloring book, and then white it out, put the line back on top of it, and it's just another source for painting. I'm always looking for different sources, different places to draw from. It's like that's you know, just as good as like a child's drawing or, you know, a window in Italy or any number of things. So
Wonderful. Lots of materiality and technique that we can see here. This is great. Well, thank you. I'd like to open the floor to questions. If anybody has any questions.
Talk about that one.
the drawing painting. So, I mean, just directly, it's my son were here. He'd say that's my painting.
That's what I was thinking.
And he doesn't mince his words. It's like you have to explain the process a little bit. It's not, you didn't exactly make it, but I copied you for sure. Yes, I'll give you that one. No, it came from the drawing was done on a trip to Colorado, 2020. Just had to like get the hell out of town. Took the family to Colorado on a camping trip, and it came about like I was cooking dinner, and my brother's fiance is great with kids. She's a teacher, and she had all this stuff with her, and it's like, you know, Ollie had this idea. My son Ollie had this idea, or was given a prompt maybe of like, let's make a space drawing to put this together. And I wasn't watching this happen. I was cooking dinner, and then I kind of see this thing he made. And it's a tiny little, 5x7-ish kind of drawing. And I saw it, and this happens certain times, like you just kind of see something and it's like just ready-made for painting, ready-made to be used as source material for something. And in part because it was really beautiful, like really a fun thing to look at, these stickers and the drawing on top of it. It's clunky, it's kind of funny, like he's trying to depict space and like filling in this. He wanted it to be black, obviously, but he didn't have the patience or the skill or whatever to kind of fill it in. And I like that sort of, it kind of falls flat a little bit in that way. And the idea of representing something like really incomprehensible, such as space on this like little piece of paper was also really, obviously it's very cute and charming, sweet, but really fascinating as well. I think it's like, that's kind of how I think of painting as well. It's just sort of like condensing things onto a flat surface. So it's sort of a metaphor as well. And then also like, the other reason when I saw it, kind of like it clicked immediately is I'm working on all of these like moon paintings and kind of celestial bodies and or like sunset gradients, just things that are kind of beautiful and mysterious and pleasing. And there's moons all throughout. There's shapes also connecting throughout. So it's just sort of like immediately like right in the face, like this is going to be a painting. So, and yeah, it's like, with most things as well, it's like once I have the idea of an image or the source, it's like then it becomes a problem solving. How do I make the painting? What makes the most sense in terms of building this up? And so that's also where I draw a lot of like inspiration and like just having fun and inventing kind of a bit in the studio. So that was a really fun painting to kind of think of how to make. Yeah.
Anybody else? Great. Well, Bradley, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Let's all come this way. Kathy, why don't
So big, so fast.
So, I'm not worried about it. Thanks, everybody. So this is Kathy Drago, and this is her exhibition, Lake, here in the hallway gallery. Kathy is a native Houstonian. She received a theater arts degree from the University of Houston and worked for a decade at the Comedy Workshop. That's something I didn't know about you until I read your bio.
Oh, okay.
And you taught comedy and improvisation classes to countless Houstonians over the years, it sounds like. You taught theater in public schools, and all the while you drew and painted as much as possible. On retirement, you then studied at the Glassell School of Art. And from 2019 through 2020, you participated in the Glassell Studio Block program for emerging artists with independent practices. So Kathy, I'd like you to now share with us your work here. You have a really amazing project that sounds like it spans years.
It does. It does.
This looks like a lot of work and love all together and reflects time in a very interesting way. Why don't you go ahead and tell everybody about the project?
Well, I want to thank the Art League for this wonderful opportunity and for all you being here, because Houston art community is just the best. I mean, we're so lucky to live here. I started this project a long time ago in 2017, and I was at my studio, and I was at that point where I finished a body of work, and I either had to start something new or clean up my studio. So I decided to paint, and I looked at the Houston Chronicle, and there was a photo of a woman I admire, an older woman I admired in the Chronicle, and her name was Bertie Simmons, and she's right here. And she was a retired Houston ISD principal who came out of retirement to become a principal again because she just had a heart for poor and underserved kids, and she was a hero of mine. And I just ordered a huge caseload of these wood panels, and I thought, well, I'm going to paint her. And I'm so glad I did. This isn't the original painting of her, but I painted her again for this show. Her family has the original. But the way I cropped it, I realized she was kind of leaning out, and she had such a great, intense gaze that just made you want to look at her. So I liked it so much I started painting more of them. And I was kind of well into the project when I really started understanding exactly what the meaning of what I was doing. Because I knew I was honoring old women, and I knew I was showing aging and showing characters. But I realized I was also dealing with my own approaching aging and how I wanted to grow old. And I started to understand that each one of these portraits is a little bit of a self-portrait. And that was pretty eye-opening for me. And I really like how making art reveals to you what you're thinking, even when you don't know it until it comes out. So that was exciting. A lot of people ask me why I paint old women. And one of the reasons is I think they're underrepresented in art, not only as artists, but as subjects. And I also think they suffer more from ageism than men, because in art culture, we want our women to stay young and beautiful, and once you get to be about 75 and up, that's kind of a hard thing to do. And so I felt like I needed to do that. And I've had many influences, and one of them you brought up was theater. I've always liked good stories and characters, and I felt like I paint these like an actor builds a character, where you start with externals and let the externals show what's inside. And another influence was my grandmother, and I think of Brian Ellison and your project there. I was lucky to grow up with the best grandmother ever. And she was just full of life, and she really showed me, how you can live your old age fully. And she had a flower shop, and on Saturdays I would help her in the shop, and she might be making a casket cover, and she would have me read obituaries to her. And we loved it. We would talk about how a person's life was just encapsulated in a little picture and a few paragraphs. And I've always found that fascinating, and I still read obituaries, which has served me well in this project. It's funny how artists make rules when they do a body of work, and you think, artists are so free and whatever, but every artist I've talked to comes up with a rule for something. And I think the big parameter in this work is they're all old, which is 75 years and up, and it's an actual geriatric category. And I love painting these old faces, and I've always said they're like landscapes, like the topography of the eyelid droop and the jowls and the neck flab, and their faces are asymmetrical, and I find that fascinating. And sometimes people come into my studio and they see all these portraits and they think, why don't you paint my daughter or my grandbaby? And do you see what's on the wall? That face is very smooth and not that interesting. It hasn't lived a life. And so I thought that was interesting. I do paint in oil, and I'm a slow painter. I paint in layers, and I think it serves me for this body of work because in my studio, they're all on my walls in different stages of completion. So as I'm working, I think more of art is looking rather than actually painting. And I'm looking at them and I'm making choices for when I come to them again. So I'm glad I'm slow in that process. I use source photos. I use obituary photos. I take photos with my iPhone when I'm out in public, like to go to a quilt show or something. That's just the mother load, to get ideas. I look at social media, and I'm just looking for a gaze and some kind of strong emotional content. And sometimes old women ask me to paint them, and that's the best of all. And this woman right here, her name is Margot, and she died last spring. Her sister is Stella Sullivan, who is a mid-century artist here. But her daughter brought her into my studio, and she started looking at some of the women on the wall, and she started crying. And she explained to me that she loves to go out with her daughter to a restaurant or to a museum, and most people look through her or look past her, and it's like she's invisible. But she said, these women on the wall, they make you pay attention to them. And that was so good for me to hear and understand more about what I was doing. And so I see this as one piece, not separate portraits. To me, it seems like a force, a collection of old women saying, pay attention to me. So thank you.
Yeah. Can you tell us? I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, one thing, how many of the small works in this grid are there? How many individual?
Oh, here there's probably 90. I haven't counted them lately. I've got more at home, but these made the cut. And then there's probably around 10 that are out in people's homes that have framed them or something so they wouldn't work in this exhibit. And in a way, I like with the pandemic, this show was, I think, supposed to go up in 2020, around the same time as Bradley Kerl's. And it was kind of fortuitous in a way because I could paint more of them. And I like painting them. They're like eating chocolates. They're fun to paint. I mean, I paint other things too, but sometimes I see something I can't resist.
Yeah.
And, I have to put it down on a 10 by 10.
Yeah, and we see that you even go a little bit larger than that.
Yes, I did, and I like that, and that size too. And I've even I want to go bigger because this size is. These are like wrist paintings, and these are elbow paintings.
Yeah.
It's different gestures that go into them.
Right. Well, thanks. Does anyone have any questions for Kathy?
I have one behind you. Sorry, creeping back here. You may have talked about this. I may have missed it, but the format seems really particular, like the piece of wood.
Mm-hmm.
Did you talk about that yet?
I just I bought these wood panels originally to practice on, but then I painted my first old woman on it, and I painted more. I liked them because they were the shape of an ectochrome slide.
Okay, got it.
And it just kind of fit with the age to me.
Nice. And were there any like technical things to overcome with
Yes.
that? Okay.
They're really thin. They're only 1/4 of an inch thick, and they warp.
Okay.
And so I learned, got to paint them on both sides several times, stick them under heavy things, and they look pretty straight. But when I brought them here, the humidity was different, and Jimmy had some wonderful wax to help me out to straighten some of these ladies out. I'm sure they're going to need some more straightening out as time goes on.
Sure. Thanks.
How has painting these women made you think about approaching aging?
It's made me think. Okay, it made me read several books. Like there's one called Women in Late Life, and what was fascinating about that book was one of the themes of the book was when you're this age, if you're not in pain, if you don't have terrible physical problems going on, and your mind's intact, that it's the best. They say it's the best time in their life. They don't have a boss who's, breathing down their neck. Their children's stories have already been told. So they don't really worry about how they're turning out because they've already turned out. That ship sailed. They get each day's a gift, and they get to do what they want each day. So it's taught me that, and sometimes I'll have a different mood, like if I'm depressed, I may end up painting someone that looks a little worried, like this gal or something, or this gal. But then other times it's, I like how she's just at peace.
The portrait selection process, is it something that you look for specifically when choosing?
How do I choose? I'll see people in public that have a face that has some kind of integrity. It might not be a great integrity. It may be something that's sad, or it may be something that's joyful or something, but there's something that's really compelling about their face, and I may just take some random shots of them. And I do look at the obituaries, especially on Sunday. Get a lot. They're not all dead though. Some of them are still very much alive, and some of them have passed on since I've started the project. But sometimes things will just surprise me, like our next door neighbor's house was for sale, and there were different realtors coming in, but I always thought they were the same person because they were always women wearing scarves and a red jacket, and I thought they were the same person. But then this woman right here, her photo was on the sign when it sold. I'm like, oh, I like that face. She'll be the generic realtor here.
Anything else for Kathy? Wonderful. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you.
All right, let's join Brian in the meeting. Thanks, everyone. This is Brian Ellison. He's a conceptual artist who believes art is a universal language that can be a catalyst for healing. I wanted to read that specifically as you wrote it because I think that's very important. So through your lens, you document the everyday Black experience, such as gentrification's impact on historical communities, under-publicized Black love and camaraderie, parenthood, and the persistent courage of Black women and men. You directed a film, Unmasculinity, which is part of the Black Man Project, right? Of which you were one of the co-founders.
Yeah.
The founder, which is a project that travels the nation, doing this kind of work, documenting these experiences. And originally, you're from Tulsa,
Oklahoma, yeah.
and you are currently an MFA candidate at the University of Houston. Congratulations. What year are you in?
Me and my second year.
Second year. Excellent. All right. Well, why don't you tell everybody about your project?
Okay, before I get started, man, can I please I just really want to take a second. Whenever you're standing in an artist space, just know like you're really standing inside the heart. You know what I'm saying? And I just want to take a moment. Just a moment of silence to acknowledge. The women on the wall. Anybody who's ever been impacted by a grandmother, a mom. I'm fine, stop crying. I don't ever want to do work or make art that is not tied deeply to me. And so, the moment I want to take is just to say thank you to the ancestors. I want to say thank you to the prayers. Thank you to the guidance. I've had many fathers. I've had many mothers. I've had many grandmothers. And many brothers. And the way God universe has put people in my life, I'm thankful. So I didn't even start off with that super dramatic ass intro, but we got it out the way. We're going from there?
Yeah. You have a really, really beautiful emotional installation here that really functions this entire space as one puzzle, essentially, even though it's made of different components. Can you start by actually telling us about the video that we're seeing here?
Sure. First and foremost, let me say thank you to Jimmy, Patience, all the Art League. You guys say this. It's a full circle moment for me. Michael Healy and Jenny Ash. Michael Healy is a good friend of mine, and about 6 years ago, he made me be in an art show that I didn't think I was worthy of being in. Jenny just so happened to be a judge in that art show, and in that art show, I won first place, and I had talked myself out of not even showing up for it. Mr. Healy was like, hey man, he pretty much did everything, to be honest with you, and got me in that space. And I just want to say thank you to dope ass friends and good ass people. You know what I'm saying? They y'all matter, and I'm really appreciative. But into the video, it's a montage. It's a story. It's a story of cadence, story of just everyday living. The women in these videos are people that most of them I know, some of them I don't know. And I just wanted to explore and pay tribute to like the everyday living, the conversations. You kind of mentioned it earlier, Ms. Drago, when you talked about the invisibility. Like if you just sit down with your elders and listen. I'm raised by my grandmother. I'm raised by my grandmother's sisters. So I was an 8-year-old boy in the van traveling to God knows where with 6 60-year-old women with some chicken that's wrapped in foil. And so, these type of things are not, it really has really made me who I am and how I see the world. And I just really wanted to, this is the continuation, this is the first iteration of how I just want to tell the stories and highlight them, and they deserve to be highlighted and pay tribute to. There's a portion in this. So this is my great aunt and my other great aunt, my aunt Barbara Jo, my aunt Mary. And I'm just talking to them about my great grandmother and their great great grandmother and what that was like coming up with them and some things that they remembered. And then fast forward on, there's a part where I asked people, like, what was the name that you have for your grandmother? Everybody's name is different. But when you watch someone talk about the elders or somebody who was an elder that played a significant role in their life, like you watch their eyes, like they gaze away. They are going back to that place, to that smell, to that touch. And I think it's just so beautiful, which is why, I wanted to create a space similar to that. My grandmother passed 10 years ago, unexpectedly. And there's a part, and there's a song that plays, and Andre 3000 is rapping, and he says, if there's a heaven, you would think they let you talk to your son. And I repeated that 3 times. And then it goes on to say, if you see my mother, he was talking to another friend of mine, if you see my mother in heaven, tell her I'm lost. If you see my mother, tell her I'm lost. And then it cuts to the birds. And the reason it cuts to the birds is like, for me, birds never really get lost. They have an internal GPS. So even when we feel like you're in a shitstorm and everything's crazy, you don't know what's going on, you don't know up and down, they're like, I feel like I'm still floating on the prayers of my ancestors. And I'm still guided, even though I feel lost. I'm not. So I'm going to end up right where I'm supposed to be.
And can you talk a little bit about the photos on the wall? These are all grandmothers
Yes.
that you have encountered and you know personally?
Most of them I know personally, most of them I know. There's only 2 of them I don't know, like, in deep depth. They live in the neighborhood with me. Okay, then we have, this kind of conversation. Where the mic is raise your hand. So, yes. So right there, where Michael is. So, that's Miss Junie. Junie was my great grandmother's neighbor. She's still alive. And she's been living in that house for 67 years. So she watched generation after generation after generation. And, this picture really means a lot because I had to It took me 4 attempts to get her to take a picture, and her daughter called her and convinced her. And the day I was leaving to come back to Houston, she said, Big Mama said she'll take the picture. You better get her with her right now before she changes her mind. So I booked it, and we sat down. We talked for like an hour. I just had to give her some insight on why she's important to my legs and why her story needs to be told, and how thankful I am. And once I was able to kind of give her an explanation of what I approached, she felt a lot better about the project, about me taking pictures. Great. I also think it's important to note that all grandmothers look different, and right here, we call her Grandma OG. She lives in 3rd Ward. Her name is Alley Cat, though. Alley Cat in the red. She literally runs the whole entire block. If she say no, it's a no. If she pretty much gives you access in or out, and the way she maneuvers and navigates the neighborhood, the parties she throws for different people, just always thinking about other people. She's such a grandmother, but she's a grandmother in a way that we wouldn't typically think about someone who's a grandmother, but it's beautiful nonetheless, In the same story, that's her friend next door, Miss Ella, and that's my great grandmother on my dad's side, Miss Walker. I love this picture because the aesthetics in the back. If you look all the way in the back, you have photos on top of photos of every grandchild that you would think of, their great grandchildren, on and on. And she said, "Baby, this is where I sit every day. I got to get my word." So she's sitting right there next to the Bible. It's just a story. It's just beautiful. Even the aesthetics of those 2 pictures to the left and the right before it goes into the door. It just feels intimate. It feels home.
Actually, that's a really good segue. When we talk a little bit about the arrangement that you have here in the center.
Yeah. Whether you know it or not, if you ever walk into a house and they had this and you couldn't sit in there, that was the first gallery that you ever saw. You can't touch anything. You better not sit down. And it's so interesting because yesterday I was watching people and no one was really sitting down. I mean, there was an exception. Kelly sat down. She said, "I sat on the couch." I said, "Kelly, I don't know." So I didn't really put instructions of not to sit or to sit, but it's interesting to see people are not sitting. But I know you want to sit down on this couch. It looks great. But yes, the first gallery is paying homage. It is the peppermints, the strawberry. Who didn't have a peppermint lady in church? Whose grandmother? My grandmother always had peppermints for whatever reason. I never seen anyone leave the house. So she got her from. She had a supply guy. She dropped them off and leave. But I don't know where she got these enormous amount of peppermints from. So it's just been homage. The Bible. There was always a Bible somewhere, if not everywhere in the house. And the plastic is just, yeah. Say it again.
The preservation.
Preservation. What you said?
Well, I'm going to ask if you can speak to, I know not everything is there, but to the jars on the wall and kind of how that ties into the rest of this.
Preserving, the art of preserving. My great grandmother, when she passed away, her preservers outlived her. And I just remember, the dark carpet in the room. I remember the very dark wood in the room. And when you opened up the cabinet, it was just preserving that she left behind. And I just think it's just talk about, a friend of mine yesterday said, so this is my great grandmother's blanket quilt that she made. And friend of mine yesterday said, so interesting. I bet she would have never thought that her quilt would be in a gallery. And that was enough just to make me just pour out. Because, you know, the legacy lives on, and like people get to live vicariously through my experience and through their own experiences. Because some people, a lot of people have walked in and said, this reminds me of my grandmother, this reminds me of my great aunt, this reminds me of. I'll listen to the smell of the mop off, and then the door. Let's not forget the door, the screen door. So important. The plastic. I don't know if you've ever had the unfortunate privilege of having the other side of your thing touch the bottom of your feet. It's like that. And you know, I mean, we got to do it since we're here. We might as well make it all live. And you know, one thing we weren't supposed to do. Let that happen. And so, it just speaks to the whole all-around experience. And I just really wanted to invite that. The inside of the home. Yeah.
Did you intend for people to use the door? Like if they come in and
It's literally the same thing as this couch. You know, it's like, if they do, I'm interested. But it's funny because yesterday I opened the door and somebody called it. So, you know, it's like this internal innate thing that people know, you know, wherever the hell we get it from. It's just there. So,
and lastly, most importantly, are we allowed to take peppermints?
absolutely. We have refills. But once again, man, thank you everybody. I'm sorry, not sorry for the emotional introduction. Anytime I do something, I'm gonna do something that feels like here. I can't do something that doesn't feel like here for me. So I love y'all. I appreciate y'all for coming. Thank you, thank you.
Any questions while we're here for Brian? Any questions about anything in particular?
Man, this is a smooth example of pollination of culture, man. So congrats, man. My question is, when we have many different people on the wall here, was there any commonality that you came across between like each of them? It's like, man, that you walked away with? Or was every experience different?
I think the comment, like the kind of red within, like me sitting and taking these pictures is just the ability, the appreciation of being heard and seen. Like to sit down and take your time and sit down with your elder. Like each and every person was open and enjoyed it. And it was like, I learned so much. Like, have you ever talked to your 80-year-old aunt about sex education? Like, seriously, like these are conversations I was having. And it was just eye-opening. Like, wow. You know, and so that was kind of great. It's just like the openness and the genuine appreciation for taking the time out and like trying to have a conversation.
Were most of these women from the South, Texas,
Definitely. South, all of them from Texas or Tulsa, my hometown. And so it's probably about, out of the 10, I think three are from Texas and the rest of them Tulsa. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that quote on the back?
So, I know yesterday is loud, people walk around, it's hard to hear. But my great aunt, she talks about sayings that my great grandmother would say. In hard times would make a monkey eat pepper. Basically, she was talking about if my great grandmother would cook food for them and they would act like, we don't want that. My grandmother would say, hard times would make a monkey eat pepper. So you must not really be hungry. So, yeah, that's what that quote means.
Is it a video?
It is. She talked about it. Yeah. So.
I wasn't here last night, did any of the grandmas come to the opening, or?
They weren't able to make it. Sue, in particular, the ones that live here, weren't able to make it, but we weren't able to make it.
Yeah.
And my great aunts, they wanted to kind of wait to, make it a lot more clear than we're going to visit. Not so much people.
What was the meaning behind backbone?
When I think about a grandmother, man, I just think about the structure. Like, what is your body without a backbone? It's just like, when I think about community, when I think about anything that's strong and held up, it's held up by a backbone. And like, grandmothers are a backbone. They are, the unsung heroes, sheroes, if you will. And that's really what it was speaking to.
How did the energy, the time, the conversations contribute to your healing and your wellness?
Man, great question. I cried a lot the last 2 weeks. A lot. Like, yeah. I didn't really mourn when my grandmother passed, and I finally feel like I mourned her. But I celebrated her at the same time. I've been having a whole reconciliation process with the idea of home and what home means to me and the people in it. And so it's been liberating and challenging at the same time, but it's been beautiful. So it's been emotional, but it's been really, I've been allowing myself to feel the feels, whatever it is. And so it's a part of the process. Yeah. It's a great question.
Thank you again, Brian, very much for this. Thank you. It's wonderful. Then let's join Ronald Jones. That's right. Please feel free to take off your mask or keep it on and stay distant. So this is Ronald Llewellyn Jones. This is his work out here in the sculpture garden on the patio. Ronald is a Texas-based multidisciplinary artist whose work has been exhibited at Folks Fine Art in Houston, the Museum of the African American Culture, Flatland Gallery, Contemporary Arts Museum of Houston, Space HL, Galveston Arts Center, Hardy and Nance, Box 13. You may have seen, I know I've seen his work all over the place, and every single time it seems to be a little different and a little more challenging. We've also done, had your work featured in lots of different places, in the Houston Chronicle and Paper City, even in New York Times and BBC News and a couple of places. And you are represented by Hooks Epstein Galleries, of which you currently have an exhibit up?
Yes.
Yeah. You want to go ahead and tell us about what you did here?
So I have 2 felonies. They prevent me from doing a lot of different things. And having them makes you kind of navigate the world a different way, knowing what limitations actually are set out in front of you. I try to use art in a lot of ways to bypass some of the things that are set out, like housing. At one point, I applied for a residency, and figured they would deny it. There was a whole point of it was apply so they could get denied. And it was because I wanted to, like, I felt like I was carrying these convictions in secrecy, and I felt like not being able to talk about them was like hindering my growth in a lot of ways. So at one point, I was working at a museum, and they were having a show that was about like mass incarceration, just being in prison, being incarcerated, and I didn't feel comfortable to join the conversation, and I felt like I had to leave in order to have the conversations that I wanted to have. At one point, I applied for residency. It was the Zocalo Artist in Residency that was in Spring Branch, and as a part of it, I was saying I thought they would deny me in the time that they said they would, which is in the semifinals round. And they didn't, so I made it to the finalists and then actually won. But it wasn't until I was in the office about to sign the release that they ran the background check and ultimately denied me the opportunity. One of the first persons that I reached out to was Ginny Ash, and it was because I didn't know what the next day was going to be like, not knowing how anybody was going to receive that information. I just wanted to, let Ginny know, because Ginny let me know about the opportunity. Then I told Dennis Nance, and at that point, they reached out and spoke to the organizers of the opportunity, but nothing changed. And I was trying to figure out how to really deal with having to make that information public, not like on a one-on-one basis, because it was a voting situation where I would have to tell whoever voted for me why I don't have the opportunity anymore. So I just made it public, and that got picked up by Flash Tire and then by the Chronicle. During that time, it was just like it was really hard. It was like when I got out of prison, it felt like I didn't know if I was going to have friends anymore, if anybody was going to want to be around me, and that's kind of how it felt being put back in a situation where I'd have to say this aloud again. I just was trying to figure out in that moment how I could put what I was going through into context in a way that I didn't really have to speak about it, but I could just show folks what I was meaning and what I was intending. So one of the first pieces I made, I used these acrylic sheets that some of you can see here. I used them to simulate or to express like a barrier or a glass ceiling that a person might come up against. Something that you don't see until you write up on it. And the first piece I made was in a small enclosure where it was a single sheet with a glass, a single sheet with a suspended, that was suspended with 2 clear lines and a single gold thread that navigated through the space. And I felt like I was trying to speak to like a person that is moving through a glass ceiling, whether or not the ceiling would move out of its way. And so I used that same type of information for this, essentially saying that like an individual with this line, the orange line that navigates the space, is navigating a lifetime or a life experience or just life in general. All these suspended ceilings, all these things that navigate that hinder or could potentially hinder a person's like pathway, just float like out in the world. And it's just up to you to know how to navigate this type of environment. But for me, I felt like when I was going through all that and doing it in a very public way, that I had so many people helping me move through like this web of like instructions that I saw and could not see in the future. And so this piece is, it's a thank you to like Jenny, my friend Lupe, Shayna, and Dennis Nance, just folks that were there for me when I really needed them, like folks that I didn't have to ask and they just performed. Yeah.
Your process, I've been watching you work for the last few weeks. It's incredible to see you kind of go at it.
there's some things that I would like to see, but I really can't determine what it's going to ultimately look like. I knew I wanted to create something that would start here and kind of encompass the entirety of the space, but I also wanted to just let it be what it was going to be. I knew that I only had so many entry points I could attach to that were higher, but I don't know. This is the first time I've done something with suspended sheets outside, so it was kind of scary trying to figure out whether or not like they were going to fall on people. But it's been pretty windy and it's held up, so I'm pretty stoked on that. Yeah, no. So after like the first day or a couple hours, like I get to see like what shape it takes on, and then see how I can make that move in a natural way, where it doesn't feel like it's forced going either direction. But all I knew is I wanted to create a sense that like there was no way for you to navigate through this without having to engage any of these sheets. So much so that I blocked off the pathway back there so that people couldn't avoid having to go through it and go see it. And even though like this narrative that I put out in like this physical form is like representative of something that I went through or something I've experienced, I like to think about it like being able to deconstruct the situation and removing yourself from it so that way you can see it from the outside in, and then other people can see themselves reflected in that action or in that story or that narrative. So I mean, even though I'm saying like I'm having help navigating through all this, what I'm also saying is, you know, anyone can navigate so much of what's happening in the world if people just were able to pull themselves out of their own situation and see that like someone else is walking around with the same amount of like bullshit on them that they're trying to navigate at the same time, and just with the shared understanding of like what things that we're going through, like people can start to move out of the way or move some of these things out of people's way, and that help them navigate.
Any other questions for Ronald?
I spoke with you yesterday, and you mentioned that this was lighting, and that's the first time I've seen like light or incorporate different elements. And can you talk a little bit about the process?
Yeah, so when I first started working on like the idea of suspended sheets, I wanted to use light, but I didn't have like the funding, or I didn't know of like a light source I could use. So I replicated that, or like used gold embroidery floss as a way to say that this is where light would be within the sculpture. With this, well, honestly, I broke it, but like I wanted to use light because I was thinking of this phrasing, you know, lightning catching lightning in the bottle. Like, sometimes you don't know what you're looking at until it's like captured, right? Like you just see someone on a path, like maybe navigating it in a way that you don't really see the whole effect of what's going on. So I wanted to incorporate light so I can like emphasize that point. But this is the first time I'm actually using it, and you know, I'm troubleshooting it right now. But like the idea is just so that it glows. Not so much to cast light, but to show that it is a living process.
In these lines, which one would you say that you embody? Like, this might be out here, but I'm looking at this and I'm like, you would embody the piece, you would embody the yellow color, right? Like, how you bring light to these different places, you know, like how you, it wasn't a question, it was more of a statement, man. I just want you to know, I appreciate you, man, and I'm so valuable.
Thank you. Yeah,
It does it, but it's kind of, to me, the line almost acts like a character in a scene.
yeah, I mean, the idea of it is, you know, it's just that when you look at, like, you know, they always have the saying, you know, like the closest place, the fastest route between two places is a straight line, right? But like if you're looking at like a person's lifeline, if you're looking at it like one dimension, it's just like a straight line, right? But like if you were to add dimensionality to it, like you turn it sideways, it's like all these peaks and valleys that are going all kinds of ways, right? And like they're going all these kinds of ways because there's obstructions and things that they have to go through in order to arrive to the next place. Like there's things that you have to actually go through in order to like experiences that you have to go through in order to like find the path to the next place. So yeah, I mean, I feel like that's what it is. It's just something made like the lived experience made physical, like but like in a really abstract way.
And like the solution to a maze,
Yeah.
including the mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the glass ceilings and obstructions that we like run up against in life, like someone placed them there, right? Right, and for the purpose of like hindering you from moving in a certain path or certain direction. So I look at it like, you know, we're able to get to wherever we want to go if we make sure everyone has the same tools, right? And without trying to create a paywall or some kind of like system that makes other people have to work harder in order to get to the same place, or make to that same place unattainable.
Have you thought about these, like they are apps towards a solution? Think of them as apps for you, craft.
Yeah, like especially this one, I look at it like, you know, I have another piece that's titled Message from the Future, and I kind of look at it like that, right, where, I mean, just like I said, you know, prior to, like, we can look at, if we remove some of our biases that we have, like, just within ourselves, see how we can be someone that moves someone through like a hard time, or let someone else know about a potential hazard like in the pathway that they're moving, then you know it's like a map to like a better place. Yeah, that's how I look at it.
Yes. So every time you do one of these pieces that kind of speak to your record in the past, do you find that to be more freeing for you?
I mean, like I planned the show, like, like when I said that I applied for the residency, thinking that we get denied, like this was the show I was gonna do based off of that, but using like the letter like of denial in the reasoning as like the backbone for it, right? But yeah, because it's one of those things where it's fucking hard to find a place to stay. It's like there's so many things that like you don't have to like you don't think about that like may not affect other people that like keep you from moving forward and being in the same place. Like I wanted to move out of the apartment I was staying in and like have an opportunity to be someplace else and like build like 6 months or however long it was, right? Like to have like just the experience of being someplace else, right? To have the ability to be someplace else and like what thoughts could come and like just the environment that was like what the environment would do, right? And then being able to like jump start off of that and say, well, like I was at this other place and like they let me stay there with like these with this record, so maybe some other place will like allow that too. So, but I mean, yeah, it's like my mom always says like a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So like you have to say the thing that you want, you have to speak it into existence, and whether or not like the person in front of you is the one that like makes that pathway like available. Like it's just saying it like makes you more aware that it's something that I actually want. And maybe somewhere down the line, like that conversation becomes something that like you don't have to have anymore because it's out for you. So yeah, good.
Oh, sorry, was that? All right, well, I think that's it. Thank you again. Can we give one more round of applause for these amazing folks? Thank you everyone for coming today. Have a great afternoon and stick around. Looks like we ended early, so have a nice one.